Welcome to Laugh, Cry, or Die. This is a comedy disability podcast hosted by two people who aren't very good at being alive. My name is Steve Wilbury, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Nay Strain.
Hello.
And we're gonna have a rambling chat today. We've got no guest this week. We're just taking a week off to be ourselves and
Yeah,
just talk about the things that we deal with and topics that we find uh, link into our disabled lives.
who knows where it will go?
Who knows? There might even be kittens. Spoiler alert.
Oh, exciting. Because that works well on Spotify.
I've had a really intense 3.5 days because I had a gig and then I drove to my turn to trauma dump now. So I had a gig, a big show day. And then I had a day off and I had another gig where I had to wake up at 6:30 in the morning to drive to Takaka. And then
Mm.
I did a show and an hour of walk around. And then I went and saw a friend and had a little bit of food. And then the fast charger for electric cars in Takaka is broken. So I had to try and drive back on my electric car from Takaka over Takaka Hill.
Well,
And
and
I
that takes
ran
some power.
mm, and I
Mm.
ran out at the top of Takaka Hill where there is no reception. So I walked trying to hitchhike for about 40 minutes, and then I got picked up, and then I got driven to a nice stranger's house, and Rachel came to pick me up. The family was a very nice family of it was
Did they give you a jerry can full of electricity to take back?
they just they just let me take a balloon and I rubbed it on all the kids' heads, and then I like zapped the leaf back to life. And so then we Rachel came and picked me up and we towed it just over the top of Takaka Hill, and then I just leaned on the brakes to get the regenerative braking to
Right.
charge up the car. And at the bottom of Takaka Hill, I was like, it said 50K, and I was like, sweet, I'll get home on that. So I drove the rest of the way home and ran out 10, 15K from my house. So then had to walk again for I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes with my thumb out in the pitch ass black until some guy picked me up. Very nice young man. Picked me up and he goes, "Oh, if you hear a funny noise, car's not broken. It just has a differential for doing burnouts." And I was like, cool. So he gave me a pretty quick ride home.
Nice.
And then I got home at like 10 o'clock at night, which was a stressful day.
That's a ridiculous day.
Which is why I was in bed going, "Ow, I don't want to wake up." And then you texted me on my watch,
Oh,
and I was like, "Bzz, bzz,
is that what
bzz."
woke you up?
Yeah, that's really what woke me up.
Sorry.
No, it's fine, but I think it ties into this thing of like doing normal life while being a spaz, because even recording this, like today, I really didn't want to wake up. And I
Mm.
had to have my meds before the show because I'm still like it just pain has been like I've been coping really well, but my son's on school holidays. I need to be a dad and tidy up my house and,
Yeah.
wipe my
Because that
ass.
stuff is hard for anybody. And never mind like walking 40 minutes thinking you're going to be all right and then walking for another half hour. That sort of day is stressful and a lot for anybody, but you're
Mm.
broken as well.
And
Doing
right, and it's
day-to-day
like,
life, like just normal stuff like a job and kids and that sort of thing. It's
mm,
hard.
it is.
I described it to somebody yesterday as for a normal person, they will wake up and they will do their teeth and they'll get dressed and they'll make a coffee, etc. Now try doing that with one hand wrapped up in sellotape. You can still do it,
Mm,
but it's really hard. It makes everything so much more difficult. Everything is slower and you have to give more thought to it and just thinking more
mm.
draining.
It's everything is so much slower because you're like, I know, and it's, these things we talk about, like learning with management and stuff. You're like, okay, there's this job or this thing that I would like to achieve or accomplish or to have happen.
Mm.
And you're like, a normal person will, after they have finished doing their job or any one of the 100 things, they'd be like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. But I have to like find a space where I have the enough energy that I'm going to do it right, and that doing it's not going to put me back in a deficit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it just, you have to really get used to that long view of like, yeah, I have a thing I'd like to do. I'm going to get there at a point.
Yeah, yeah. And then thinking which things are you allowed to cancel or put on the back burner so you can achieve, like very much prioritizing. But sometimes you can't plan that prioritizing. It happens kind of instinctively. Like I was saying before we started recording, that there's a thing going on in my life that I can't go into
Mm.
detail on. But it's
She's a
quite a lot of
spy.
it's a bad situation. Hey.
You're an international spy. That's why you can't talk about it.
Well, pretty much, yeah, yeah.
That
There is
sounds way cooler than the real ick.
I know. Well, I mean, there are legal people
Hmm.
involved in it. So, even to, friends for confidentiality and legality, I can't really go,
Yeah,
well,
because
can't
she's a
at all.
spy. She's a spy.
Mm.
I've done the entire start of this episode with my Dynavap clutched in my fist like a pacifier.
It's on brand, so it's fine.
It's fine, but it is like, it's just, I talk about, like, we're saying about like how much like harder and slower things are for me. And when I went to pain camp, they said most studies have found that cannabis doesn't actually fix chronic pain.
Mm.
It doesn't like make it go away. And like the upwind, the central sensitization part of like my pain, I'll have cannabis and my legs will still kind of hurt, but I will also have the cannabis. So everything's that little bit easier. It's like a lubricant. It
Right.
just
Yeah.
makes it,
Yeah.
you know?
Is it a bit like
Um,
when I broke my leg and they gave me ketamine and they said it's lovely, lovely ketamine, and they
mm,
said, "How's the pain now?" And I was like,
mm.
"I can still feel it, but I just don't care." It was fine. Ketamine's amazing, but yeah, is it
Kind of,
the
yeah.
same sort of thing?
It's like I guess it does help with the kind of the acceptance. And I do a joke in my set about like my nervous system is like, instead of being fixated on, ow, Jesus, why are there all these screws inside of me? My nervous system's like, wait, what? Should we have ice cream?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it's a joke, but it is very true. It takes all the pain is so loud, and you're like, oh my God, the pain, and my eyebrows are up like this, and then I'll have cannabis and my shoulders will go down. I'm just like, okay, I have pain, but I'm covered in a warm blanket
Yeah,
of
yeah.
plant.
I suppose it's almost like how people would use maybe like meditation or distraction sort of techniques. Like when I'm
Yeah.
at the gym, I listen to audiobooks because then I'm thinking about the story and not about how much I'm hating being at the gym. So it's like sort
Yeah,
of
exactly.
covering a shit thing with something that you like to kind of balance it out a bit.
Well, yeah, and it's something different because like the pain, and it's why for me the TENS machines work as well, because you've
Right.
got the electrical impulses are louder than the pain impulses.
Yeah, like white noise. I found that before
Yeah.
when I was in a situation where I'm full of secrets today. In a situation that I won't talk about on here, but where there was a lot of loud noise happening at night in
Hmm.
my house. Yeah, and so it would be silence, and then the loud noise. And I'll say this because I'll mute it out. And
All of that stuff, yeah.
and yeah, and so it would be silent because it's bedtime, and then this loud noise would happen, and so my heart rate would spike that this thing's happening, and
Hmm.
then it would drop. And so I found white noise was really good because it narrowed that gap between silence, so it would bring it to here. So the gap was this rather than this,
Mhm.
and so it made it less.
Sorry, I just need to show the kitten where her food is because we moved her food balls.
Okay.
This is why you should watch on YouTube, because right now you're looking at a kitten. an annoyed kitten who wants her food. She's like, "Get me out of here! I'm not a cuddle monster. I'm
She-
a monster.
Not
I'm
as
gonna
chill,
murder everything." That's her. She's a murder cat. She's
she's
gonna be
not as
set
chill
up.
as she was before.
Look, there's your food. Right. Sorry.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So when there's silence and when there's loud noise, that jump is really like
Yeah, it's
shocking.
really jarring.
Yeah. And so if you can have the white noise there, it makes that jump smaller. And so
Mm.
it's not as such of a shock. So is that kind of that, the same sort of thing with
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. It's
Mm,
because it's like if I'm having a bad time, like a loud noise in a movie will make me flinch, you
right.
know?
Yeah.
And it's that same thing where like a little thing, like a loud noise at night, makes your whole system jump into this big thing. I'm on
Yeah.
a bit of a pain pulpit today, so I'm going to go ahead and tell another story that I heard at Pain Camp that
Yeah.
is really good at illustrating just how weird our nervous systems are and the way our reactions are. So, there was a man who lived in Australia, and he was a snake scientist, the most exciting kind of scientist. And he was out looking for snakes, as you do,
Yeah.
and he was walking along in some prairie grass, and he felt a bit of prairie grass brush his leg, and he was like, "Oh, that's a bit of prairie grass."
Mm,
I don't know what they call prairie grass in Texas, but a bit of grass.
yeah.
Whacked his leg. He was like, "Okay, that's fine." 5 minutes later, he looks out and realized he'd been bitten by a deadly poisonous snake, of which there are many in Australia.
Um,
And he had to go be in hospital and have this huge thing where his leg almost fell off.
right.
He,
Right.
he recovers, still loves snakes, goes out to the forest, tries to be a snake scientist, and a piece of prairie grass brushes his leg, and he has this searing, white hot agony
Yeah.
that is like, oh, but he looks down, and it was literally a piece of prairie grass. But
Mm.
his brain had learned to associate this phenomena with
Um,
your leg falling off. That's a really extreme example of it. But like in kids, like when Lewis was sick, you can have a knock and your brain, because it's kind of dumb sometimes, you can have something like a sprain or a arm break or something, and
mm.
it'll just like freak the fuck out and be
Yeah,
and
it's almost
relabel.
like that physical memory of it. It's almost like, without belittling, it's a kind of a PTSD response. Like when
Yeah,
you're taken
yeah,
back to
yeah,
that
yeah,
point.
yeah. I'd say it's not. I mean, I don't know. I obviously don't have PTSD, but that thing where like one innocuous situation triggers off this whole chain. But with PTSD, they're conscious thoughts, whereas this is like sensations, which
Yes,
are
yeah, yeah,
in this weird conscious, subconscious level.
yeah, yeah.
And I was said to Rachel the other day that like so much of pain management is convincing your brain you're not in pain. Because like my eyes were up. I noticed, and it's this constant mindfulness. I want to do some comedy about it, but I don't know how to make it funny.
Right. It'd just be counselling on stage.
Yeah, I just be like, so here's yeah, it'd be a good like TED talk maybe. But
It'd be
like
more
I'm
TED
like,
talk than comedy, because otherwise she's standing on stage going, "Please, can someone help me? This is a genuine cry for help."
I'm in so much
Hey.
pain. I know that's the show is I'd do live pain counseling on
Yeah.
stage for
And you could
money.
get questions from the crowd, and you get, "So is anybody else in need of counselling?" Get them on stage to share
Yeah,
their trauma.
there you go.
It's a
Profit
show.
off other people's misery. Isn't that how this post-capitalist society we have works? And I'll
Yeah.
live stream the whole thing, and then you can cut it up into reels to put onto TikTok.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Which is how I
boom.
spend my life nowadays.
Apparently that's just your thing. You love it. I can't stop you.
You say I love it. Let's say I do it. Quite different things. It's like a full, no, I wouldn't say quite a full-time job, but it's a part-time job at least, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
But
But like I feel bad that this is why I wanted to pay someone else to do it, because I do not have this. I have barely have the space to do this.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the
Well,
editing,
I've
I
had to
can't.
put so much stuff on the back burner to do it, like writing, the scripts and things. And so I was talking to a friend the other day actually, and she was like, "Oh yeah, with your writing, and do you want to do this thing?" And I'm like, "I have to chop things up for TikTok." This seems ridiculous, and that self-promotion is horrid. Uh,
Mm.
yeah,
I
but
was doing a set at the Ruby Bay Tea Rooms
you
because I'm
rock.
kind of a big deal, you know.
You've
Hey,
made you've made it.
I did Wakefield Town Hall before Christmas.
Ooh.
Lo- For, I believe, the entire population of Wakefield, which was like 27 people.
Well, do you
Uh,
remember when we did that thing? Sorry, I interrupted that.
yeah,
That
yeah,
thing
go.
was it in Taka, where a bunch of us went over to do that comedy thing at the cinema.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
that
yeah.
actually got a few people, but I think that's
Yeah,
because there's nothing else to do in Taka. And there's like,
absolutely.
there's strangers in the town. And
No,
so
it really
again.
is. And there is like some money to be made in going to middle of nowhere New Zealand or anywhere if you're living in another country that's sparsely populated and has like,
They're starving for attention, so we could turn up, do any old shit, and they go, now pay us.
well, this was like my very first show when I had my shitty manager. That was the whole thing. It was the
Ooh, yeah.
greatest magic show in the world, and then we'd crossed out world and written in graffiti paint like whatever town it happened to be in.
Right, yeah.
Um, and it was fun. It was a cute show. What was
That
I
was a
talking
lot for
about
you
before
to,
that?
I was gonna say, that was a lot for you to manage, having that stress, like trying to be a rubbish disabled person,
Hmm.
doing your magic and stage and trying to, keep on top of that, and then having a stressful situation of, the politics and things behind all that.
Ugh. Yeah, I mean that was, and it's
See, there's
it.
me again going into spy mode. I'm purposefully not mentioning names. I am so
Mm,
good at this. I am a spy, a
it's
self-appointed
fine.
spy. People don't, there's no reason for me to be spying. I just watch people and gather their secrets.
Oh, that was it. So just with the having to spending your life chopping things up for YouTube
Mhm.
or for Reels, I did at the Ruby Bay Tea Rooms. I finished my set and I said, "Well, you can find I'm still Steve Wilbur Entertainer. You can find me on all your social media channels and blah 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 blah." And at the end, I go, "Isn't it sad that I have to do that? You know, because it's the future. Well, it's not the future we were promised. I don't have a jetpack, but we're in this weird post-capitalist dystopia hellscape, and I need you to do that for me because it's a
Yeah,
thing now."
it's like
And I got
begging
a
for
round of
friends.
applause.
Begging for friends. Like I went into
Mm,
went around to a few tattoo studios to get a quote, and in one of them, and I can't remember the guy's name, and he said he's been listening to the podcast, and I'm going to feel crap at this, but from the comedy scene, and he was in there because he knew the tattoo guy, and so we'd all chat
okay.
a bit. And then he said, like, "Oh, you do that podcast with Steve, eh?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I've been, watching the clips on Facebook and that, and it makes me laugh." And I'm like, "Sweet." And so then I found myself saying, "Yeah, remember to like and subscribe and follow and all that stuff." And it's ew, ew, I did that in real life. And that's
Oh,
doing it online is one thing, going, watch this thing, but to
yeah.
actually say to people's faces, please like me, is horrid. I mean,
It,
yeah, it feels
I
so
don't know if
wrong.
it's a generational thing, if like, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, if they're like just like, oh no, that's just like what you do. But
Yeah,
because we were raised in that time where you didn't talk about money, like how much, and there was like these a lot more rules to polite society, I
yeah,
guess.
like going for an interview for a job, you like in olden days, in my day, you don't ask about what the pay rate is, and you don't, sell yourself in I'm amazing at this, like what are your strengths? We're kind of humble and a bit embarrassed to sing our own praises.
No,
Whereas,
that's specifically English, but
okay,
it's
I'm just so hugely polite.
just so I think the whole English vibe is like, I'm really sorry I exist, but I need privilege.
I'm sorry to be a burden. Yeah. That
I
is actually a
know.
really big thing. And bringing that back to the disability, so much of when I am sad and talking about, seizures and stuff,
Hmm.
so much of it is I really don't like being a burden on friends because they have to take that into consideration, or they get concerned if I haven't been in contact, or being a burden on the paramedics, having to take time in their day, even though that's their job. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, or being an ED, and it's like, I'm sorry that I needed to be intubated and you had to help me breathe. I'm awfully sorry. And it's like, yeah, I need to get over that. And I thought that was just a me thing, but now you've said,
No, no, that is the cologne, that is the fundam I here's my TED talk about it. Here's my idea about it is that I think it's part of the class system where, like, if you're well off and rich, you don't need help from the state or anything. And if you're well off and rich, like I was listening to a Behind the Bastards, and he was talking about the rich gamblers.
mm,
And so, like, after the Second World War, there was this generation of younger British aristocrats who didn't have the power that their parents had had, didn't have the war to deal with, and had all this family money, so they would just gamble, right? And if
right,
you were
yeah,
a bit short, you get a loan from your friends. You wouldn't get a gift. No one would ever gift you anything. It was a
yeah,
loan, and you'd pay it back. I'm just a little bit short this month. I need to sell my thing in the Haiti or whatever, and then I'll get some money,
yeah,
and then you pay the guy back. And one of the guys who wasn't a lord, who was kind of a bit of this new money, quote unquote, like in the literal sense of the word, he was like, "Oh no, if he didn't want to give someone money, he'd be like, oh no, it's a gift, it's a gift. You don't have to pay it back." And then they wouldn't accept it, which is
right,
a roundabout way of saying that the whole English thing of, like, I'm so sorry, I need something, because I'm not one of the upper class people who don't need anything, who would never need anything.
yeah,
As part of
yeah,
that polite veneer, that you always want to be, up the ladder a little bit, but because you did it yourself with nobody's help. And it's this ridiculous narrative that isn't true for anyone,
yeah, yeah. And
you know?
it's definitely a cultural thing. Like my brother came over to visit with his partner, and his partner's Chinese. And we're talking about, sort of different cultural and societal stuff.
Mm,
And my brother said, like, as English or Western or whatever, if we say wanted somebody to help us move house, we'd say, "Oh, hey, I'm really sorry, but is there any chance?" And it's no problem whatsoever. But just asking, really, it's okay
mm,
to say no, and I don't mind. But would you possibly, maybe, perhaps help me move? But it's okay, and that's how we would do it. But his partner in their society would go, "Hey, yeah, help me move," because they're your friend and your loved one, and of course they would help you. Like,
mm,
why wouldn't they help you? Because you're
mm,
friends. And so it's quite strange how culture is so different. And it's like with
mm.
being English, we'll quite happily steal your country, but we won't borrow $10. Yeah, what's
Yeah.
that about? I would colonize your country and take all your money, please.
So I know a person who is not diagnosed, but is almost certainly somewhere on the ASD.
Right.
And they go to teach in China, and there's no, the way they were explaining it to me, and I think one of the reasons I kind of like it over there is because that false pretense, it, like you're saying, it doesn't exist. It's like it is or it isn't. Either you are someone in a shop who wants to help me, or you're not.
Yes.
And, like, if you go and you don't say, like, can I pretty please have a bun? You go, "Okay, give me that bun. Give me the
Yeah,
bun."
yeah.
And it's just how it is. And it shapes everything, which is something I don't think I'm fit to comment on. But it's an interesting thing. But when we look back to ourselves, like, for one thing that I can comment on is similar to you, but like the American version of, like, when I was really sick and Rachel looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You are never working another job again, ever. Stop." And then I got another job and lost that job. And then I said, "Okay, fine, you're right." Because
So do you think that your Americanness is that, like, I can do anything, and I, can be the person I want to be, and I can be strong, and so to step back from that and go, actually, perhaps I can't be that. Do you
it
reckon
was
it's a bit of an
what
American thing?
It was very much an American thing, and it was also an 80s male thing of providing for my family.
Right,
And the
yes,
idea that
yeah.
I couldn't give them like the childhood that I'd had with, I'd had a really nice childhood. We ended up moving countries and I'd seen the world, and my dad, for all of the things he didn't do fantastically, that's one thing he did do really well. He provided very well for his.
Right, yeah, yeah.
And the idea that I was like, okay, so instead of the nice house, we're going to move into a small bus, which we can afford, that I will make with my bare hands, blood, sweat, and tears, and the help of my dad as well, who came out and spent a good month or two
Mm,
helping us get it livable.
mm.
And we're just going to live within our tiny means and be as happy as we can. Which is, my son is very well adjusted and everything's fine, but like letting that go of that idea, and we talk about this a lot, of that idea of that person who can do the things. Plus, like I was saying before, that cultural conditioning of this, I'm not the thing I was told I was supposed to be, so I suck.
Yeah, and it's funny, it's that self-judgment that we always struggle with, because you could see it from one angle going, oh, I didn't achieve this, that, and the other. But outside people would look at your life and go, that's amazing. He's not giving all his money to paying a mortgage and he's doing his own thing and
Mm,
travels around the country doing magic shows, and it's to somebody else, it's that dream life.
mm,
But because it's not what you were conditioned to think you should have, then, I mean, I've had a friend say to me, "Oh, your life's perfect because you don't have to do anything." And that kind of sucks, but it's from their point compared to what they do have to do. They don't realize I actually do a shitload.
mm,
But, the outside perception isn't necessarily as shit as we think it is for ourselves. And as well,
mm.
it's
Well,
it's it's cultural with the whole of society. Like my dad, he spent some time in Canada, and he was helping with some of the indigenous people to drop supplies to the different, sort of outreaches and things. So on their seaplane, and one morning they went out, and all the planes, are outside people's houses, and he went to start the engine, and it didn't start because there was no fuel in there
mm,
anymore. And he was like, "Oh, somebody's taken the fuel." And my dad's like, "That's an outrage, and who would steal from you in the early hours of the morning?" And the guy
mm,
was like, "Well, they obviously needed it.
mm,
No biggie. We'll get some from somewhere else."
mm,
And it's that, nobody was judging, and it's like someone's taken because they need it, and also that societal thing that they're not taking it because they can have it. From the person
mm,
who's taking it point of view, they weren't just stealing because they want more. It's like, oh, they needed it, and I had some, so yeah, what's the big deal? That's something that we kind of get, I think, a bit scared of in our society. Like if you've got a food bank, and say if you put
mm,
a pantry out full of food, then a lot of people fear that someone's just going to turn up and just take it because they want it. And it's like they don't
mm,
deserve it. They don't need it. We should poverty test before we give food to people. And it's like I generally think that people who are of means aren't going to turn up to a food bank and go, "Yay, free pasta." That most people who use those sort of services need it,
yeah.
but
Oh, for sure.
we get scared because we're a grabby society.
Oh, and that's like as in America, it's so much worse. That idea of like, what if I can't, they take my money and they give it away to drug dealers, or in like in the UK, there's this idea of the generational beneficiary and stuff, of
Yeah.
which some do exist, right? But do
Yes.
you
Yeah.
say, am I going to punish everyone because 3% of it is like
Yeah. Yeah.
fraudulent, you know?
Yeah, like with a food bank, I would rather one person steal or take when they don't need to, if that means that 10 people are going to get fed or 10 families are going to get fed.
There's a banger of a food bank in Nelson, Tasman called Kai with Love, if
Yes.
you're a person who struggles a little bit. And they don't means test. You give your name, and very nice people are like, here you go, sweetie. And it's all stuff from the supermarkets that they can't use. And they go and just hoover up the waste from consumerist societies.
Yeah.
And then they're
Yeah.
like, here's some food with love. And that is a very culturally New Zealand thing
Yeah.
that is one of the reasons I'm still here, because these horrible things that exist, New Zealand has versions of, but there is somewhere deep down, there is like this little spark of that Kai with love, and there's these things from Te Ao Maori that have like filtered through into Pakeha life that
Yeah,
are
yeah,
like, like hospitality and giving, and there's lots of big long Maori words that I am still learning to pronounce,
yeah, yeah,
but it's part of the fabric of New Zealand and is what makes it as relatively successful as it is, even though there are obviously massive inequality problems in this country and lots of the same diseases that are afflicting the rest of post-capitalist society.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But
there's Kai with love, man.
yeah, I mean they are amazing, and yeah, it's not a food parcel full of crap. It's they're treating
Yeah,
people
no,
like
it's good.
humans,
It's good stuff.
giving
I
them.
like a whole roast, or like and they supply animal food as well. You
Yeah,
get cat
yeah,
food
and they've
or
done like
dog food with it.
toiletries and
Yeah, and there will be like a
stuff.
random bag of like there. It's always like kind of like the weird sweeties that didn't quite sell, but they're still nice. There's some
Yeah,
sweet
yeah. And see,
biscuit or
it
something.
does cause like a knock-on effect, because then people who have received, that support are then encouraged themselves to drop a couple of tins off at the food pantry,
Mm.
or to assist somebody else, or something that they've got, rather than putting it in the bin, they'll chuck it on Facebook and go, hey, does anybody need this box of muesli bars? And it makes it a lot more of a coherent society, because people want to help each other. And I think if you can surround yourself with those sort of people and be more involved with that sort of group of people, you see more good. Whereas I
Yeah.
think people who are who are perhaps well off and don't need to be connected like that, perhaps see things as a bit negative.
Well,
Um,
yeah, it's if you've never had to put your hand out, you're less likely to put your hand out.
yeah, yeah,
And,
and you're more likely
but
to get.
that's a terrible analogy.
But
But it's
yeah,
like
no, it's like
it's
if you've never had to call for help, you're more likely to, I think, judge people who do.
oh,
Because,
for sure, for
yeah, because
sure.
you struggle, but you get through it. So why can't everybody else? And it's a lack of understanding, and not necessarily in a negative way towards people, but if you've not experienced something, you're not necessarily.
I think it's also like the lack of empathy. Like empathy is not taught in schools, and it's not a trait that our culture values. And like empathetic people get really taken advantage of by narcissists a lot,
Yeah,
according
yeah.
to Dana Carvey's therapist and a podcast I was listening to.
We're extremely skilled and qualified in mental health. We have bad mental health, so we
Mine,
can give advice.
I tell you what though, man, we were talking about pitching it back to the disability thing a little bit. My God, I'm such a
Yeah.
executive hippie, but my
Uh,
brain and my long-standing depression that comes with my chronic pain are so much better with microdosing psilocybin by like orders of magnitude. It
really.
is wild how much more like the just I can lift the weight. It's like we're saying with the other medications, like the weight is still heavy, but I can lift it now.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's been so many studies of depression and chronic pain, and whether depression comes from the chronic pain, or if you're depressed because you have pain, or if the pain makes you no idea. All I know is if I take literally a pinch of plants
Mm.
in the morning when I brush my teeth, my I can just lift the weights better. I
Yeah.
can
And that doesn't have that particular medication. It doesn't impact your ability to function. It's not, as in, it's not making you high.
no, it's
It's just,
subperceptual. It's
yeah, yeah.
it's just like all the other, because I keep it in my medicine cabinet because I take it at the same time that I take my dihydrocodeine, my venlafaxine, and my other pill that I can't remember. But it's the red and white one.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
That's
and it's not doesn't give me any like euphoria. I'm not, it's a
not
frickin' plant.
tripping balls over your muesli.
No, although, that would be fun of
Yeah,
a,
yeah.
of a once a year to clear out the cobwebs, but it doesn't. I just
Christmas
take a
morning is
teeny
a
tiny
silly
bit
morning. Yeah, yeah.
and I do like the idea of like a Christmas morning acid in your muesli. That would be
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, get the
Christmases would
family
be
around.
so much better, and you wouldn't have a hangover.
Yeah, and there's lots of pretty lights and twinkling things happening. It'd be beautiful.
Oh my God.
Acid Christmas.
Acid Christmas. You know what? That's gonna be a thing. It's gonna be a hashtag.
At least in your house.
Ah,
But yeah, it goes
oh
with
no,
that
no,
that
oh,
it
but
goes with that judgment of you have to experience something to appreciate it. So like that microdosing really helps your pain and it doesn't, have negative effects or anything like that. But to somebody who's never had intense pain and tried that, they're going to immediately giggle about it like me going, oh, you take drugs and get high because
yeah.
they've never needed to try it and so don't understand it.
Well,
It's like with with the seizures, people see me fall down, get some medication and go and have a little sleep,
mm,
and so it doesn't seem that bad. And people, people understand and stuff, but from the outside, it's half an hour or an hour that thing's happened for, and then I
mm,
carry on with my life. But other people who have seizures understand that actually, no, that can fuck up your whole week,
yeah.
having that one
Yeah.
incident. And so I guess what I'm saying is people need to put themselves in really shitty situations to make them better people like us.
Like,
Go
because we're
suffer.
amazing.
I'm
Oh my
like Jesus.
God.
I'm Jesus. I will suffer to help society learn how to be better people. I am
I think you had
Jesus.
acid in your cornflakes. Wow. That was strong out the gate, early morning. I am a religious figure energy. But because we're in the 21st century, you're not going to get crucified. You're just going to end up canceled.
Yeah, that's true. But this is our podcast that is about religious ideology, and we will convert people to our cult. That's how we're going to get our money. That's
That's
how
the
we can get an editor, is by starting a cult.
that's the long game. L. Ron Hubbard was right.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
What we
So
really should do, we should write a book. We should have like the book of death, the book of laughing, crying, and dying.
what like is that our equivalent of the Bible?
No, it's one that has perky bits of wisdom plucked from our reels. We get an AI to go through our reels, pluck out bits of wisdom, shove it into a book, print on demand, and it lives next to someone's toilet or as a great stocking stuffer. Merch, baby.
Okay, I'll learn how to do that and I'll get editing.
Actually, so the point that, like, to bring it kind of back to the actual podcast instead of us
No,
being
I was
stupid
enjoying taking over the world right then.
and being Jesus.
You know,
Someone's got to do it.
what are you gonna
Jesus,
do?
Jesus sure ain't doing it. Um, where oh yeah, that was it. So we were talking when earlier we were talking about like the whole like the cultural and the letting go, and one of the biggest things, and this was a huge problem for me, was this idea of like I wanted the stability of a job. I wanted that boring. I go in, there's the same amount of money in my bank account every week. I know what tomorrow's gonna look like. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna go to my job, and I'm gonna be like, ugh, paradise.
You're right.
That like and also the normality and the cultural conditioning and stuff, but that stability doesn't exist for anyone, you know yeah, letting go of that idea of the stability, that
Mm-mm.
was huge. And looking at like Buddhisty stuff and impermanence was a big help in like making that leap. But for a person with like continuing health challenges or epilepsy or a long-term condition, um I think that desire for stability is really deep rooted.
Yeah. And like I was saying about other people don't understand, say, our situation because they've not experienced it. We kind of have to look at perhaps there's in their situation, we're looking at it through our rose-tinted glasses that, oh, we wish we could have that life.
Mm,
But I mean, I know we've experienced it to an element in the past, but we're kind of idealizing that life is better.
mm,
And I think there's a lot of reasons why that life isn't better. And so maybe that's another sort of snippet that I would say is everyone's suffering and everyone's finding life difficult for their reasons. And we only look at the good parts for the people's life, a bit like on social media, how we only see the good looking selfies. We only see people going, hey, I've had this amazing holiday. People don't post, well, I've just had 2 weeks of doing absolutely nothing and looking like shit. And we only see the
Exactly.
oh,
Sorry,
look,
I'm just posting pictures of a sleepy kitten for anyone
he's,
who is having a hard time in their life.
he's beautiful. Is he still called Phoenix?
It's a she.
Oh, she. Still called Phoenix? Was that the name you decided on?
Phoenix is definitely her name.
Oh,
She is now she's been terrorizing for hours, and now she's in sleepy mode, and she'll take pats when she's in sleepy mode. So I'm trying to use my webcam, and it's very disconcerting.
that's cute. Is she old enough to have had her, bits snipped and all that business?
No. She's still an inside kitten for probably another month or so.
Nice.
She was a very young 8 weeks when we found her.
Yeah. She's tiny.
But what was so sad was we got her, and at first she really, she was very scritches averse, you could say.
Right,
But
yeah.
like every once in a while, like now you could, when she was sleepy, you could get her and you would like pet her and she'd start purring, and then she would start like nuzzling her head into your armpit, looking for a nipple to suckle on,
Yeah.
and you're like, and then she'd look up at you and be like, and you're like, oh babe, I'm sorry, I can't
So
do anything, I
cute.
can't.
That's so
Um,
lovely. I'd love to have a kitten, but then you have to deal with them pissing.
oh no,
And
she was litter trained. It's there.
yeah,
She's been, yeah. You do have to deal with them trying to murder literally everything. They are very entertaining. I could sit and watch her all day as she just
yeah.
zooms around. Um, but what we were saying before, and it's a point I make a lot, is that like having had the disability or having a disability, which even though I'm so much like better than I was a few years ago, I still like have this big heavy backpack that I have to carry everywhere.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
gives you the time to appreciate this how soft your pet's fur is, like with Safety Cat,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like our other kitty, Sammy, who's like we ragdoll trained him, so you can just pick him up and hold him like a literal baby. And I say to him, I'm like, who's my little ball of endorphins? But like, if I'm having a pain day, I'll pick him up, hold him to my chest. So there's a warm thing on my chest for like 30, 45 seconds. And I do get a bit of a relax from it.
Yeah. Well, I read a thing about cats is that with their purring, like the frequency of their purring, like the
Mm,
vibration, they alter that to kind of match with ours, and not in a hippy trippy way, but in an actual physical way.
yeah.
This kind of like the speed of their vibration kind of
Yeah.
ties with that. A bit like how when you're doing breathing together, that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And that's genuinely like a healing thing, which is why they like having pets in rest homes and
Mhm.
things like that, because it's genuinely healing.
Well, I said to Sam, I was like, who's my little companion animal?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
as much as, take the piss out of people driving around Walmart with their chihuahuas and stuff, like animals do help with a lot of things.
Yeah. And it's that, I think it's that unconditional kind of support with no expectation and no judgment. It's just a
Mm,
living being that we can be around that just
yeah.
takes things on completely surface value.
Yeah. And it's soft and feels nice on your hands.
Yeah, and they're funny to look at.
And also, like, I sometimes when I'm petting Sam, I'm like, it would be so sweet if somebody who was like 8 times the size of me just used their giant muscles to like massage my shoulders. Like that would be
Yeah,
fucking. Actually, you know what? Look at my gym gains, yo.
yeah,
Oh,
that's impressive.
that's
Good.
weird.
That's
That's a
great.
weird look.
You should do the rest of the podcast like that. Hey, this is how I always stand.
Which way is it to the beach? You know what was weird? So when I was a young man, and then it's probably about time to wrap up. When I was a young man, and I had like I think I'd had my I had my J pouch at that point, but I was like rail skin. I was skinny.
Yeah.
But I was working in a juggling shop and going to juggling training 3 nights a week, and then juggling at home when I wasn't doing anything else. And I was this like stick with these Popeye arms. Like my biceps were ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
I've found that
I
when
still
I've
don't.
just like kind of practiced juggling, it's like, yeah, not like you, I can like do 3 balls and it's like, yay. But when you're sort of doing that repetitively, even for like 10 minutes, it does get achy. It's quite physical.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like
Mm,
if you watch Jay Gilligan, it's one of my favorite jugglers.
mm.
He sweats like it's, I mean, to be fair, he's a very physical juggler, but it is it's like that, you know, low weight, high rep exercise. There's like a specific type of it, and it is like it's hard, you know, if you do a full juggling show. That's why most juggling shows, like a street show, is mostly talking with a tiny bit of juggling, because juggling's
Right, yeah,
hard
yeah,
work to keep doing.
yeah.
Uh, and even like I do a Diablo routine that I am knackered at the end of. Like I
Yeah.
literally have to be like, okay, give me a minute.
Because yeah, that's really physical because that's like throwing up in the air and moving.
Motherfucker. Sorry, I'm just looking out the window and there is a starling munching on a strawberry that they have stolen from my strawberry plants.
What kind of Enid Blyton life is that? Oh no,
Mother.
a starling stealing my strawberries.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's podcast. If you have listened along, thank you so much for joining us. If you have a health or disability problem, or I don't know, hate life, give us a yell. We want to talk to people and be social with other inhuman humans.
Yeah, that works.